Hey everyone, welcome into Patterns Tell Stories. I'm your host Klaus, and today we're going to be talking about haunted people syndrome, Caudate Putamen, and the recent legislation that just got killed or will be apparently getting killed in the House. With me today, as always, is my co-host Garrett. How's it going, man?
Really good. It's been a crazy week.
Yeah, a little bit. Oh man, lots of ups and downs. More downs than ups. I guess it depends how you look at it. So this week there was some news that the Republican leadership, first in the House, Mike Rogers and Mike Turner, both basically, according to Chris Mellon and several other sources, are putting the kibosh on the UAP Disclosure Act of 2023. That's obviously extremely disappointing. You know, they just went over it at the Soul Foundation conference last weekend, laying out a plan that we talked about, where it was pretty much based off this amendment that was coming out. Talked about non-human intelligence and craft of exotic origin or unknown origin. Yeah, it had pretty much everything in it that we could have wanted. And it's very telling, I think, that the defense lobby apparently came in and convinced these guys who are Republican leadership that kind of killed this thing. And they even got Mitch McConnell, the Senate, I guess, minority leader right now on board. And they're at least neutering this thing and ripping out the important stuff like the review board probably, and definitely the eminent domain aspect where the government could go and take back any materials of unknown origin that were in the private sector, which kind of makes sense that people had a problem with it. But I think it really gave the bill teeth. It was clearly a threat to certain individuals in the defense establishment. Yeah, man, what are your thoughts on that, and how do you see this going forward?
I think it's sketchy as fuck that anybody is against any of the shit that was in this legislation.
Fucking dude, right? It's crazy.
Nothing in there. I feel like any reasonable person that listened to Fravor and Graves and Grush, I feel like at first I was like really fired up about it because like I'm really into politics. At the same time, the problems that we're seeing now are like problems of our system. Lobbyists straight up came up and made sure that this did not happen. And that's very telling. And we've talked about that before on this podcast, how like lobbyists, a lot of these companies pay more for lobbyists than they do in taxes. And that's wild, because that just tells you how much pull people have. There's times that you can't, Democrat or Republican, I know that there's candidates that like you cannot even sit and talk to unless you put down 10 grand.
Yeah, I've bitched about this so much already on Twitter, and I'm bitched out right now. I'm super fucking over it. And like, I was really bummed out at first too. And was kind of like, really? Like, what the fuck? But you kind of sit back and realize that like, every single time the defense establishment just comes out and just straight up is like, no, it's just another validation of how this cover up is so real and is so ingrained. And it's kind of undeniable at this point, because you have, the top politicians in the country coming out and killing this thing because it's obviously a threat. This bill costs no money. I don't know, like $20 million, like less than OSAP. It's literally just a transparency bill that should be a slam dunk for any other subject. Just the fact that they find this as such a threat that top politicians had to kill it is just so telling. And I think, honestly, people who want to push for disclosure can use that to their advantage. We can kind of take this and be like, hey, it doesn't mean the mainstream media is going to investigate it, which is also absolutely ridiculous and another extremely frustrating aspect of this that we can get into another time. But yeah, pretty much this whole thing is just a giant admission of guilt.
I like how Dave Grush kept using that term catch-22 for his strategy on trying to open this up. He would talk about how like he would want to come forward with information, and then he would verify if that information could come out. And then depending on how they responded, it put, I would assume, the intelligence community or the people in charge of that type of decision, I feel like it puts them in a position where depending on how you answer a guy saying, hey, can I say that I saw, let's say, 15 alien bodies? If someone's response to that is like, you can say that you saw biologics. I feel like it's a funny, the way you phrase things getting cleared to be talked about sounds like a really funny process, because it seems like it puts the people in charge of that decision in a position where they're like, I would call that a catch-22. Like, how do you respond if it's this sensitive and secret? They have to be very like ambiguous with their response. So
well, even like they say, yes, you can say it, and they're like, okay, I can talk all about it. And if they say no, it's like, okay, it's real. You just proved that. So it's really, it puts them in a bind, because like, if this program is indeed illegal, as certainly sounds like is the case, basically puts them in a position where they either have to admit it or let them talk about it. It's kind of a place that they put themselves, the DOD, and keeping all this stuff secret. Is now they're kind of damned if they do, damned if they don't.
Mike Turner probably got the most ballin' fucking lobbyist dinner these past few weeks. He was probably balling, bro. Like,
these fucking assholes, man. It's just so frustrating knowing that like it's so clearly not in the interests of the American people to like intentionally and publicly not be transparent on this stuff. I've bitched about it enough. I've made my points, and go check out my Twitter feed if you want more on that. But on a more positive note, Gary Nolan was just on the Good Trouble show with our friend Matt Ford about an hour ago. I think it ended. I think you took some notes on that. Can you let us know some of the important points you took away from that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the first and foremost, I thought Dr. Nolan did a great job of expressing his opinion and sounding intelligent, and also still being funny and charming. I know he's a very busy individual, so like I really like that he came on a show like Matt Ford's, because I know he's a cool kid, works really hard. I don't know why I call him a kid. He's a fucking he's a cool dude.
He's not old, but he's not he's definitely older than you.
And exactly. And
he's a cool cat. Yeah.
He's a cool cat. And I always thought it was dope that like people like Gary Nolan will come on shows like that and talk to someone. And Fettuccine Split is a fucking legend for
that was funny.
They went through the whole slide. Anyway, like seriously about UFOs and the Seoul conference and stuff. Gary Nolan was reacting to like the recent news of them shooting down this legislation. And he made a really good point that like no one ever succeeds if they quit at their first failure. So as far as this year's goes and people getting discouraged about disclosure coming, and like the fact that this legislation this year got shot down, I feel like no matter what, people can take away a win. Like, look at how much more aware the everyday person is about this topic. We just saw they talked a couple times about Grush's appearance on Joe Rogan, which was another like really big, significant thing that happened this week. And I've noticed more people interested and like coming into Twitter spaces and DMing me and asking about UFOs that generally didn't really have an interest in this topic. And you can tell that they watched Dave Grush on Joe Rogan and they were like, oh, this is like this is actually happening.
huge deal, man. That's a big deal. And especially like right before Thanksgiving where people were talking with their families and shit. But yeah, we'll get into Grush on Rogan in a minute. But yeah, sorry about that. Go ahead.
Yeah, you're good. Gary Nolan was like, he seemed real disappointed in, like we were saying earlier, how lobbyists went all out to make sure that this did not happen. And that there's a problem with our system of just like, this is a problem across the board, is that lobbyists have too much influence on our politics. That's one thing. They asked him about catastrophic disclosure.
Yeah.
What is the risk we run of NHI all of a sudden appearing to large swaths of the population and people just going crazy? Gary Nolan's response was really cool, I thought. He clearly doesn't pretend to have all the answers. but he pointed to an event like the Phoenix Lights in Arizona and like what that did to that community and what that did the way our media was.
Yeah, he was saying there wasn't really social media fully at the time, so the information didn't really get out like it would have on Twitter if that was around back then.
Exactly. You know? And he was making the point now that like that might be an example of when that type of event happens, how culturally we react to it. When I look at it, I still think that like a modern example of something like the Phoenix Lights would be like a big problem to explain away, you know? And that's just one story that like a lot of people corroborate. There's many people that come forward and say like, oh yeah, I remember that in Phoenix, Arizona that night. Like there's stories I've heard about that, like in New Jersey. There's people that say that things have landed in New York City. I know for sure, but like that's all stories.
Yeah, you mentioned catastrophic disclosure in that question. It's interesting. I found just kind of coincidentally that back in April, Danny Sheehan actually mentioned catastrophic disclosure in his speech he gave at the Romero Institute, which is kind of his foundation he set up outside the government to kind of facilitate also this legislation, similar to the Soul Foundation. I think he's more on the legal side of things, though. But he did mention this, and I find it really interesting that he referred to it as something that they talked about within the legacy program. Like this isn't something that they just came up with at the Soul Foundation. Like this is a actual term they use within the legacy program, at least from what it sounds like in his speech. So I found that interesting that this is something they're considering within the government. It's essentially their fear of giving up power. This is what he says. They view this as being catastrophic, not the least reason, which is that they're part of the governor class and they don't want to lose that kind of control. And that's a fairly elementary insight because, you know, it's a totally human nature that they're like that. But we have to try to figure out how to deal with that. But yeah, it's pretty much, you know, just society going crazy and, you know, the structural government's kind of collapsing is their main fear. This is what the legacy program themselves mean by catastrophic disclosure, according to Danny Sheehan. Danny Sheehan is very accomplished lawyer. He was part of Iran-Contra. He litigated 3 Mile Island, Watergate, all sorts of giant public interest cases. And him saying this kind of thing and him being involved in this is a pretty big deal.
Yeah, a person can learn a lot from Daniel Sheehan interviews. I'll tell you about like there was one Reddit thread that covered one of his interviews very well a couple years ago, and I'll still send it clips of it to you with responses he's given about like international finance and like all these geopolitical issues that people don't even think twice about. He's just a very well-informed individual. So I second that recommendation to anyone who wants to check out more Daniel Sheehan. Did you see that Gary Nolan said that the videos from Soul are going to be publicly available? I thought that was pretty sick.
Yeah, I can't wait for that.
His explanation for why he wanted to keep it kind of like under wraps while it was happening, I really respect it. Because he didn't want people just getting like incomplete versions of what these people and speakers were saying. No one was like live tweeting the event. I hope to see more of that type of style in the future. Personally, I know that even with the limited amount that did slip out, people were going all over the place with speculation about what people were saying. And it's a really difficult thing dealing with information and getting warped versions of information. I appreciate that he's cognizant of that because the ideas that we're discussing in the past, when they've been thrown around like a little recklessly, that's one of the ways they've been thrown around recklessly. People just like let speculation get way out of control. Before you know it, you have people just like accusing people of being in some like, I don't know. I thought his response was really like measured. You know, like we say, like when people tell you they know what every answer to everything is, that's probably like when you should like raise an eyebrow, because a lot of the brightest people I know that talk about this topic admit that they don't know what's going on. I just really thought Gary did a good job on that interview with Matt Ford.
Yeah, it was really good. I go check it out. Matt's a good guy. I mean, yeah, we're kind of at this spot where it's a bummer, but it's pretty much like Gary said in that interview as well. He said, that's basically disclosure. When you have the defense establishment come in and kill a bill, it's kind of disclosure in itself. It's a setback that I think we can overcome, especially with stuff like the Soul Foundation coming out. It's just another vindication of this thing being real. I think it should just kind of strengthen our resolve, just motivate us more, because there's a there that was pretty much admitted to by the Republican leadership this week.
I'm trying to remember who exactly pointed it out. I think Dave Grush pointed it out, and it was a great point, and I wanted to mention it. So Tim Burchett, Mike Turner, both Republicans, right? Tim Burchett has been borderline heroic on this topic. And Mike Turner has been rotten, instrumental, in my opinion, in killing this recent legislation from going through. I think Dave Grush mentioned on Joe Rogan that Mike Turner was trying to help Tim Burchett's political opponent to make sure that he didn't get reelected. Am I mischaracterizing that?
I mean, that is correct, regardless if he said it on Rogan. But yeah, that's accurate.
That, to me, showed me exactly this is bigger than just Democrat and Republican. This is something that is like,
right.
People need to be informed at what these people stand for.
And Burchett has been pretty quiet about this not passing. So there's something fucked up going on in the government, and I don't know what it's going to take to root that out. But that brings me to something Grush said on Rogan. Yeah, if you haven't checked that out, go do that, after this, hopefully. But yeah, David Grush was on Joe Rogan. He said a lot of things that really resonated with me. And I think people might not realize, like, he's 36 years old. He's pretty young. He had a big career ahead of him that he gave up to come out and tell us all about this stuff. The way he presented it on Rogan was a lot deeper than I think he has in other interviews he's done in the past. Grush framed this as a sort of generational thing. He was talking about this new generation is ready for a change. What's been going on for the past 80 years having to do with this UFO cover-up. It's very clearly, obviously there, considering the events that went down this week. I think he put it in a really interesting light. This is a paradigm shift on a lot of levels. This could have a lot of positive change getting this stuff out there.
The thing that kept standing out to me was how familiar he was with the structure of how these things are kept secret. One of the things I keep hearing tossed around is the Department of Energy, like the Manhattan Project. Hearing from Grush, one of the most high-ranking guys with a legitimate service record, they said he was given executive briefings. That is the office of the president. That is I don't know. To me, his record, if you pull up his history and his service history and the schools he's went to and the things he studied, he's a legitimate dude. He keeps mentioning the Department of Energy and he keeps mentioning the Manhattan Project. And this could be even deeper of a secret than the Manhattan Project. Think about what we were talking about last week, how it's possible that there's things operating that people genuinely, there's no oversight. That was the biggest takeaway from Grush's thing, was that there was no oversight and people aren't even aware that these programs are happening. So when Grush is talking, those are two things that stand out to me, is that he keeps mentioning the secrecy of the Manhattan Project, which was it was so important. There's all sorts of ethical arguments, and it's an existential issue. And there's not too many of those. And this topic, it's so interesting to me to see that it's being mentioned in this way. This is how secret UFOs are, that it has to be mentioned in the same breath as the Manhattan Project. I don't think the everyday person is really thinking about how secret the Manhattan Project had to be. I know there were small leaks here and there, and a certain number of people working on the project turned out to be Soviet spies. But the idea that what was at stake for the Manhattan Project? Well, it was the annihilation of the world. So
I know, right?
Think about UFOs. If it's being mentioned as this secret, I don't know. It's really going to take a crowbar of some kind to really pry this open, regardless of if it's some psyop or if it's a legitimate thing that's happening or some breakaway civilization. The point is like, think about what it's being mentioned next to: the Manhattan Project. I don't think disclosure might be exactly all sunshine and rainbows. You know, I think that it might be topics that, like, nuclear weapons are a very intense topic. I don't know. I don't want to bum everybody out.
Well, I'm definitely gonna not help with that right now. Yeah, man. When you think about it, in this whole like idea of catastrophic disclosure, and some sort of event happening that basically just shatters everything and turns society into a fucking dumpster fire. There's different ways to interpret this, right? When Elizondo talks about things being somber or us learning like our true nature or place in the universe and not being the highest on the food chain, there's kind of a few ways to look at it. This kind of thing also ties in with cycles of civilizations, and I'm going to try to explain this in a way that makes sense, as one should always. But this is an interesting way to think about it. So I think it's like Tom DeLonge who makes the point that the first reason that all this stuff should be disclosed is because it's nature. I guess I'll start with the Caudate Putamen that Gary Nolan's been studying. Basically, the story there, I'll review it quickly, is that Gary was brought in by, I guess, the CIA to work with Kit Green, and they had this bucket of weird cases where white matter displacement in the brain in some of these people who worked for the government, they were high functioning individuals. They had come into contact with UFOs. Basically, the way it's been presented so far is that they had sightings, and all of a sudden the radiation of the craft basically affected them, and now they have like this extra white matter or connections in their, the subcortical area of the brain called the basal ganglia, in between these two areas called the caudate and the putamen. So it seems like kind of like a passive thing, but when you think about it and you think about how Grush and others have talked about us trying to shoot down these craft, potentially like these are directed energy. Some of these pilots may have been actually trying to take these craft down when this, if these are directed energy weapons, this might have been the UFO being defensive rather than circumstantial, or they just happen to be in the area kind of thing. That's an interesting way to think about it. And Gary Nolan also talks a lot about what's known as epigenetics. Epigenetics has to do with certain factors in our environment activating certain aspects of our genome based on certain conditions around us. It basically has to do with changes in the genome due to certain environmental conditions. I should probably read the definition of that, but I think I'm pretty accurate. Yeah, it's epigenetics is the study of how your behaviors and environment can cause changes that affect the way your genes work. So it's kind of like a switch. So something in your environment can change your genes and how they work. Unlike genetic changes, epigenetic changes are reversible and do not change your DNA sequence, but they can change how your body reads a DNA sequence. That's something Gary talks about a lot and has talked about kind of in the context of the rise and fall of civilizations and where aggression comes into play there. If the leaders of these civilizations or different factions of a civilization are too aggressive, the genome is going to compensate for that down the line, basically, until it finds a kind of equilibrium to where that civilization can flourish. So he said this in an interview with Danica Patrick. I think she was a NASCAR driver who now has a podcast. It was actually a really good interview, but this is what he says. I've said this before. I think we're a bunch of angry apes. I don't think we're ready for some of the answers yet. It's like you don't tell your children certain things until they're mature enough. And we've pretty much proven that we're still not mature enough yet. It's interesting that evolution, as I've said before, doesn't care about time. DNA doesn't care about time. were sort of the first level of civilization that was achieved out of competition. The tribe that was more competitive than the other and frankly more aggressive, and that frankly had narcissistic, psychopathic leaders that were willing to unite a continent at the expense of blood, were the ones that succeeded. But as we're seeing played out in today's politics, without getting political, that's not necessarily a survival trait for a species. So is the long-term play for evolution the creation of a certain level of complexity that either realizes it needs to get rid of that aggression or there will be a collapse, a rise, collapse, rise until the genetics is selected for that? So yeah, that's kind of what I was talking about. Gary obviously is much more eloquent in his delivery. So yeah, I think it's interesting that these kind of switches in our environment kind of result in a rise and fall of civilizations, at least in this speculation that Gary is going through here. When you think about his studies into the Caudate Putamen, he basically says that, these are high functioning individuals and the extra connections between those two areas of the brain that result in high functioning is genetic. Another analogy for this that I kind of wanted to talk about is the monarch butterfly. Some of the generations, live from 2 to 6 weeks, but the migratory generation that does, the whole migration where basically keeps the whole species alive. The reason that happens is these migratory traits aren't exactly hardwired. They're environmentally regulated. Depending on the environment, these monarch butterflies will have a longer lifespan if the correct genes are activated based on, certain conditions in the environment. So if it's the time of year where these butterflies are set to migrate, I guess the certain temperature in the environment will activate these genes and they'll live longer. So if you kind of apply that to potentially this caudate Putamen situation where, there's more connections at certain times, potentially, if you think about it, maybe certain aspects of the environment or whatever happens when you come into contact, get in the vicinity of these UFOs, perhaps there's some sort of trauma there that can flip a switch in your non-coding DNA. I don't know what I'm trying to say. I guess my point is, when these people, quote unquote, in the know are talking about something like an event or a timeline or, the stupid fucking prophecy shit, there seems to be an urgency, right? My point here is perhaps there is some sort of quote unquote migration coming up. So this is a natural thing that happens in nature, right? A natural rise and fall of different lifespans within the monarch butterfly. Maybe these different changes we're seeing perhaps in the caudate Putamen and how that might be related to remote viewing and these extra senses we get. I guess my speculation is that maybe we're reaching a point where our own human migration or something natural like that is upcoming, and these UFOs or whatever might be a catalyst for that to maybe switch something on or off. I don't know. It's just some dumb speculation I have, but it kind of ties a lot together if you think about it. And if it's nature, then that kind of makes sense if you think about it in terms of like a butterfly. I don't know how much of that I'm going to cut out. It's kind of a train wreck, but
this has always been something that has been part of this topic.
Right.
If you read John Keel or Jacques Vallée's books, there's instances like I was just reading that book Confrontations, and he catalogs one by one all these different people and the types of effects physiologically that it had on them. And there's pictures of people that like have all these different effects from like coming close to UFOs. And that's my understanding of why Dr. Nolan was so impressive. One of many reasons why he was considered impressive is that like he's one of the people that was examining people who had come close to these supposed UFOs. He went on Tucker Carlson and they're showing brain scans and he's explaining that like different people have parts of their brain that appears different and that we consider them high functioning, and that like some of these people appear to have come close to, I hate to even paint it, anomalous objects. I'm very fascinated by what you're talking about. I still am trying to understand, like I'm no expert in like brain anatomy, but my understanding of the basal ganglia is that it was one of the first like instinctive parts of the brain to develop.
So I guess my point is, I wonder if these senses, we develop them in cycles, kind of like a butterfly develops a long lifespan in cycles. You know what I mean? Also, this brings me back to a story that Danny Sheehan himself tells. He talks about butterflies as well in the context of an ET civilization not making contact with us. He likens the ET civilization to a boy watching a butterfly come out of its cocoon. He says, you know, he's watching this butterfly struggle to get out of this cocoon, and then the last little like silk thread is wrapped around the butterfly's whatever leg or whatever the fuck butterflies stand on. He helps the butterfly, and the butterfly gets out of the cocoon. It's fine, but the butterfly can't fly because it hasn't developed the muscles it needs to do so. That one last thread that was holding it back was going to allow it to develop the muscles to fly. I guess the analogy being whatever advanced intelligence is here helped us in whatever way that would benefit us. It would also like neuter us in a way. And potentially maybe that last thread is some sort of sixth sense. Another way to look at it too is perhaps these UFOs or whatever are trying to be that boy and cut that thread for us and have us develop this through whatever potential mechanism they might be activating through coming into contact. I don't know. That's just a whole fuckload of speculation that's where my brain goes. And I don't know. It's just fun to think about. And but I don't know what I'm going to cut out from this, but we'll see, I guess.
Can I ask you something about the Caudate Putamen?
Yeah.
Is that how you say it, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So I saw Gary Nolan go on Tucker Carlson. While he's talking, he had a brain scan on the screen. He was talking about like the white matter and the basal ganglia and like all the stuff that you just mentioned. It sounds like when he's talking about this stuff, he's saying it in a way that's like different couples have this abnormality. It seems like statistically more than non-random chance have been having this type of, do you get what I'm saying?
They're attracted to each other, right?
Is that what it is?
Yeah. They end up together without knowing. Yeah. It's, I mean, I guess it makes sense because like high functioning people attract high functioning people.
You know what it said on the fucking, I'm sure you do, but like
Department of Energy.
Yeah, Department of, it's something about like advanced propulsion.
I know, it's what? Some brain scan.
Hey guys, maybe we should look over.
Well, and that's the thing. It's like that fucking paper I was talking about where it's the low observables department of Sandia National Labs talking about man-machine interfaces. It's like, it's like, obviously there's something going on with the human brain that has to do with some sort of connection to these UFOs. And right now we just got a whole bunch of speculation that I just butchered. So enjoy that. And I guess we'll move on. Did you know that, well, I'm sure you do know this, but I didn't know this. And I find it really interesting that the ancient Egyptians kept baboons as pets. They domesticated, well, as much as they could. They
What?
Yeah, dude.
What baboons. Makes you think I knew that? I didn't know that.
You're a Thoth guy, right? Isn't that a baboon?
No. I am stop. I'm not. I don't have any religion or any of that.
No,
I do like reading about.
By that I mean you've talked about him twice, which is two times more than I have. So okay. You're a Thoth guy.
Fair enough. Thoth is an ibis.
Yeah,
he is an ibis, and he is the Egyptian representation to some people of the Greek Hermes, Roman Mercury.
Yeah, so, you were literally just talking about him.
Yeah. And in a space, someone mentioned him, but they mentioned him like in some weird way. Like they said he was, what animal did they say? It was completely wrong though. And I'm like, I'm not an expert in any of that, but like.
Man, LiveScience.com. Ancient Egyptians traded with people in what is today coastal Eritrea to bring baboons to their temples, according to a new study of baboon mummy DNA. So we got baboon mummies. All right. Ancient Egyptians were big fans of baboons, which they associated with the god Babi.
Dude beats me.
This is your shit.
This is news to me. I don't remember Bobby the
B-A-B-I.
baboon.
Bobby the baboon, a god of the underworld and the DOD. Oh my fuck! All right,
This
let me
is
start this over.
DOD propaganda, Klaus.
No, that's all right. All right, let's start this again. Ancient Egyptians traded with people in what is today coastal Eritrea to bring baboons to their temples, according to a new study of baboon mummy DNA. Ancient Egyptians were big fans of baboons, which they associated with the god Babi, B-A-B-I, a god of the underworld, and the deity Thoth, who is sometimes depicted with the head of a baboon. So you're wrong. There you go. They kept the monkeys in captivity, removing their sharp incisors so they were less dangerous, and often mummified them as offerings to the gods. But as far as anyone can tell, baboons have never naturally occurred in Egypt. So yeah, baboons were the only non-native to Egypt animal that the Egyptians fuck.
How did they get them there? Were people bringing them?
Traded them. So this is
really,
yeah. So this paper basically is saying that they basically went and traded for baboons and brought them to Egypt and kept them in cages and like ripped out their teeth and fucking made mummies out of them.
Interesting. Were they eating them or were they like worshiping
No, dude,
them?
they just had them like hanging out and they were complete assholes. Like the baboon is the only animal not native to Egypt that is linked with Egyptian deities, and it's a little odd that ancient Egyptians took such interest in baboons. They tend to steal crops and break into homes looking for food, making them difficult to live with. The people who coexist with baboons don't really like them. So what's that about? You're the baboon guy?
Well, I know if I'm correct, there's a great video online. These like tribes in Africa will take a baboon and they have to capture it. And there's like this giant, I believe it's like a big ant pile, but like an African ant pile that's like gigantically sized. And they'll take melon seeds or something like real sweet or tasty, and they'll stuff it inside this hole, and they'll put it there in a way that like when the baboon grabs it, its hand gets stuck. For some reason, instinctively, baboons, when they grab it, they will keep their fists clenched and they'll like lock themselves into the anthill. And then the tribesmen have time to run over and capture the baboon, and they'll like put the little thing around his neck and they'll like wrestle him down and they like capture him. And then
send him to Egypt.
So then they take him and they'll just like tie him up, and he'll just be chilling for like hours. And they start feeding him salt, like big blocks of salt, because they really love eating salt. And he'll get really thirsty. And then after like hours and hours, they cut their little rope that they tied him up with, and he runs over and he'll show that they chase after him, and he runs straight to where his water source is. And that's one of the ways that they like go and find water.
That's crazy.
That's a real interesting, like there's videos of that online. And I thought that was super fascinating. When you say baboons, that's what I think of. But
that's so manipulative.
They're very smart. They're extremely smart animals, and they're very close to us genetically. I did not know that about him being associated with the deity Thoth.
That reminds me of like stories of what happens with like the DoD and experiencers. Like they'll and UFOs, like they'll basically have like an experiencer as like a bait, I guess. These experiencers like have contact with these craft for whatever reason. Perhaps, that basal ganglia thing. Man, this is a messy episode.
Don't get caught up. I know, bro. The thing is so many people are listening to the show now, and it's right, like so I get nervous a little bit. Like I'm like, dang, dude, is this gonna be like the episode people don't like? And like, bro, it's bound to happen. There's gonna be flops.
No, I like it. I just don't want to get like reamed out.
I know, but
All right. So enough baboon talk. I just thought that was funny. Like not funny, but like interesting. Because we have the alien mummies and then this shit. And I just think it's interesting that they brought, like, why did they, I guess my question is, why did they bring them back to Egypt and worship them? Like at what point, I guess, was the connection made between baboons and these deities? There's a lot, I feel like there's something there that can be explored, but I just wanted to ask if you knew anything about that. I saw both in there and figured you would know everything.
Well, an interesting story. I'm not an expert in Greek, or that's a question I would ask Peter Lavenda, because I bet he would give a real interesting answer. There's a Greek story of the Greek gods fighting this entity called Typhon. And Typhon is the offspring, if I'm correct, of like the primordial forces Gaia and Tartarus. And they like create Typhon as a challenge to the Olympian gods. And Typhon ends up beating Zeus, who's like the king of the cosmos and ruler over the heavens. Like Zeus is the man in Greek mythology. And the story goes is that Typhon defeated Zeus and he ripped the tendons out of his elbows and his knees and kept him as a prisoner. And there's varying stories on this part, but like my understanding is that Hermes and Pan both managed to like rescue Zeus from Typhon, and he ended up being in a position to mount a counter strike and ends up defeating Typhon. But this is a story where, in the story I understand, when Typhon threatens Mount Olympus, a lot of the Olympians flee to Egypt and they change themselves into animals. Apollo ends up becoming the Egyptian god Horus, and he turns himself into a hawk. And I'm trying to think.
Who is the baboon? That's the question.
I don't remember a baboon in that story. That's the thing.
Fuck,
is
man.
Like a lot of these stories, I don't want to be insulting to the cultures that they come from, but a lot of them borrow from neighboring civilizations and just like previous people. So like you'll see a lot of what you see in the Greek myth and the Sumerian myths, but they're just kind of like a lot like how you see the like Noah flood myth. You see that rendition in like there's more than 8, a bunch of different cultures have a flood myth. And it's not that like any one particular one is correct. They didn't even have the words to describe what they were going through. They're just trying their best to like, with the words that they had access to, describe what they were experiencing, if that makes sense. Or at least trying to create a story that people could get something of value out of. But having said that, that Greek story of the gods fleeing to Egypt and turning themselves into animals is a very bizarre and specific thing to happen in a particular myth that is like very fascinating to me.
Yeah, there's the idea of like, it was a chimera. Chimera.
Is how I'd say.
Fuck. So yeah, chimera. And that just kind of ties in with the whole like genetic experiment thing, I think.
That's a interesting little part of all those myths, is like there's these stories of entities that are like combinations and splices of other creatures. I don't know what the hell that is meant to like, because at the end of the day, they're writing it down. It has to be important for some reason. I just don't understand, why is a Hawkman necessary for you to tell your story? You know, like it's a very specific, bizarre element of these myths.
There's such kind of a counterintuitive thing there too, where it's like, it's like you can't believe these stories because they were made by simpletons who were just like creating a message. Like, doesn't it take more effort to like manufacture some sort of metaphor out of a story than just writing the fucking story? Like, right? Like, makes no sense to me. You know what I mean? Though it's like you're giving them more credit than you say they deserve, right? That's it just seems like a very roundabout way to explain away a story.
Let's be real, dude. Think about how much, I don't know if you went to public schools or what, but like in my opinion, I didn't learn about Greek or Egyptian mythology until I chose to. Like, I knew who Zeus was, kinda, but like I didn't really feel like I was exposed to any of these things in a way where like I could give it's like something that I feel like is just getting lost in a game of telephone. And like the way people think back on them is that they're like there was a time where people believed in Zeus just the same way that like people believe in Jesus, like thoroughly believe that. And there's still people that do. But like I don't believe in anything. So like Richard Dawkins makes the point. He's like, you know what it's like to be an atheist because I assume he was talking to a guy that I think was Christian. And he's like, you know what it's like because you don't believe in these other gods. I just don't believe in your God.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a very measured way of putting things. These stories, I don't know what to make of these stories, bro. This might be a horrible episode.
All right, let's talk about haunted people syndrome.
Okay.
Yeah, I wrote about this paper a while ago, and it's psychological research on paranormal experiences. And they found that paranormal experiences are the norm and not the exception. So they basically wrote this book about haunting phenomena, and it's very intertwined with personality, ideology, culture, and previous experience, obviously. And that's something that we talk about a lot with Jacques Vallée and how these phenomena present themselves to people differently and all that kind of thing. So they established these symptoms, I guess, of what they call haunted people syndrome. So they propose 4 core features of haunted people syndrome. 1, the meaning making or narrative created around haunting experiences is influenced by personal backgrounds, beliefs, and personality characteristics, which is what I just said. Anxiety and distress regarding hauntings are a function of the nature, closeness, and spontaneity of anomalous experiences. 3 is distress and unease make anomalous experiences more likely to occur. And 4 is anomalous experiences tend to be contagious, i.e., anomalous experiences can spread to others. So it sounds like the hitchhiker effect. So they also defined an important predictor of these experiences, and they call it transliminality, which refers to the boundary between the conscious self and the unconscious self, as well as the outside environment. It's been associated with ESP, out-of-body experiences, and visionary-like experiences in general. Almost like the super spectrum idea, right? Having just one paranormal experience is extremely unlikely. So basically, if you have one, you're bound to have more, which is why they call it, I guess, a syndrome. It's ongoing. And that's pretty much, what we hear about experiencers is that it happens again and again. And anomalous phenomena tend to be both subjective and objective. The internal aspects of the experience include sensed presences or somatic touches or marks, whereas external aspects include objects moving or apparitions caught by technology. So this is an actual psychological study on this stuff. Yeah, man, it's wild.
What do you think that means, apparitions caught by technology? What does that mean? When you hear that, what do you think? Is that like something floating around in your ring camera or living room camera, whatever they call it?
Yeah.
I was talking about that with a friend because if you go from person to person, depending on where you live, and ask them about ghosts, specifically ghosts, that's the example I'm going to use. But say you say, do you believe in a ghost? You get all sorts of opinions. And there's people out there that seem to believe that when somebody passes away, and take this with a grain of salt, I'm just saying this is a thought experiment. But people think that when you pass away, there's people out there that for whatever reason, their soul is connected to this one spot and that they just spend eternity just in turmoil in that one spot. And I was saying how that's not how I ever have conceptualized it. But I think the people that do conceptualize it like that are the ones that say they see things because they believe it so strongly. So let me put it this way. So when I think about ghosts or that type of topic, I think that it's much more likely if you believe in something like 10 fingers, 10 toes believe in whatever it is across culture. If you believe in it very, very strongly, or you're scared of it, or you have some sort of like emotional hangups about something, I think that if there are consciousnesses out there looking for ways to show itself or just looking for ways to just like exist, I think that it's possible that the emotions that human beings put out are almost like beacons for these types of consciousness. And I think that like in a way, we almost like will these things into existing.
Like a tulpa.
Like a tulpa, yeah. Like if you focus and believe enough that like you almost see a physical object rendering itself to you. I'm curious if that's what, because like I've heard that about poltergeist. I've never had anything like that. So this is just me talking out my ass. But I've heard that like the more scared you are, the more likely it is that like a poltergeist type of event is gonna be like even crazier. Like look at that Philip the Ghost experiment. Is like that guy, that person, Philip didn't even exist. People were reporting the table, knocking all around and getting all sorts of responses that made no sense.
To me, it seems like there's a couple options here. Either something happens that kind of triggers something in a person, whether it's, childhood trauma, some kind of intervention of importance that happens in someone's life. Something's either triggered or they're born with it, or like you just said, they believe deeply for whatever reason. They were raised that way, or it's hard to know what comes first. It's kind of a chicken or egg situation. If something triggers like a really intense emotional reaction in you, say you see like a person in your house that isn't really there, or like a quote unquote shadow person or something like that. You saw it, but no one's gonna fucking believe you, and it scares you, right? That leaves a mark on you. Kind of heightens your awareness in a way forever. Because you're going to be on the lookout for that kind of thing going forward.
And so when you made the point earlier, the epigenetic ideas of people being exposed to different types of environments, giving rise to their genes expressing themselves in different ways, that's what I think of. Is that like when people come in contact with whatever this is, whatever your frame of reference is for it, like I think there's a there. So like, something is interacting with human beings. Different cultures have different ways of interpreting them. I've never personally had this experience, but I feel like the evidence is strong enough to suggest that this happens. Whatever happens to the people that come in contact, I think that that's what we're discussing.
Maybe this is something along the lines of a control system that Vallée talks about, where he talks about a thermostat that can be turned up or down depending on, the state of the system. It always kind of brings it back to an equilibrium if it gets too far out of whack. Maybe there are things in the environment, or there's some sort of intelligence where they can trigger something in the environment that causes a switch to flip in, the genome or whatever, that can bring you to a certain spot that you're supposed to be.
I agree with that. And the idea that a lot of these people are kind of hinting at is that UFOs have a lot to do with early humans' ideas of their myths. That's something Tom DeLonge is like hinted at, is that the Star of Bethlehem might not have been a star like the North Star, because of the way it behaved and moved around and like led the Magi to this particular spot. I'm not endorsing that opinion. I'm just saying it's an interesting thought experiment. And if these things did have, like, that's a part of what people regard disclosure as, is that the religions are going to be involved in it. I'm not a religious person, but understanding the implications of that is like the people are going to have a potential crisis of faith if it turns out that UFOs, historically, if there's some data that suggests that these events that people regard as like sacred or like part of their religion, I can see how that's going to be something that's like upsetting. You know what I mean? Like if someone has a long-standing belief that something is the way that it is, I understand entirely if that shakes up your worldview. So I'm not trying to stomp on people's beliefs, but at the same time, if the evidence suggests something, we should follow the evidence and go from there. I don't recommend joining any group or being in any religion if it's not something that like you don't sincerely believe in, you know? Like I just feel like the most honest opinion is to say your honest opinion.
There's a quantum AI living under Antarctica.
Exactly.
That's a fact.
Something that something that like is an interesting part of this is that like I was talking about how different myths seem like rehash versions of previous myths. They're almost inherited in a way and like switched up depending on what the cultural needs were of that civilization.
Kind of like the ancient monuments.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Because there's this part of that Jacques Vallée book, Dimensions. Well, like you mentioned a control system. It's almost as if whatever these are creating our myths, which are like, in a big way, myths shape people's behavior. If you believe that this God is going to reward you for acting a specific way, it's going to have a huge sociological implication for your behavior, your neighbor's behavior. Everyone is, in a way, playing along to whatever belief system they have. A part of that book, Dimensions, was saying these events that are shaping our myths appear to have to do with UFOs, potentially. He mentions it as like almost a form of technology or a product of technology. He says, I'm not regarding the phenomenon of the UFOs as the unknowable, uncontrollable game of a higher order of beings. Neither is it likely, in my view, that an encounter with UFOs would add to the human being anything it did not already possess. Everything works as if the phenomenon were the product of a technology that followed well-defined rules and patterns, though fantastic by ordinary human standards. It has so far posed no apparent threat to national defense and seems to be indifferent to the welfare of individual witnesses, leading many to assume that we may be dealing with a still undiscovered natural occurrence. In parentheses, it cannot be intelligent, say some people, because it does not attack us. But its impact in shaping man's long-term creativity and unconscious impulses is probably enormous. The fact that we have no methodology to deal with such an impact is only an indication of how little we know about our own psychic world. I think that's going to be a big part of studying all this. The material world, it seems like physicists and biologists are like giving a hell of a shot at explaining and interpreting. It seems like that hard problem of consciousness, everybody has to come to the table soon to try to understand how this whole thing works.
Yeah.
There's the argument like, is consciousness something that arises because people develop brains and then brains become conscious? Or is consciousness something that precedes evolution and that ends up using DNA as a mechanism to create itself almost?
Right.
I like, there's both of those things are very abstract. I think that's part of what Vallée is trying to understand. This idea of our psychic world, and people like even John Mack was brilliant when he like studied abductees, is that he would mention that like whatever this is, it's certainly real to the people that it's happening to. I'm just curious how consciousness continues to play a role in this.
So when we talk about myths and their influence on potentially our culture and our evolution even, and in the context also of the control system that Vallée talks about, have you ever seen Cabin in the Woods?
No, that's a horror movie, right?
Yeah, dude, you got to see that shit.
What's it about?
Oh my God. This guy is my friend, Old Vet Shane. I think you know him. He's at Old Vet Symposium on Twitter. Yeah. He's a great guy, and he runs spaces and stuff. But he really got my mind going. He talked about this movie, Cabin in the Woods, and related it to the control system. And yeah, you definitely have to watch this. It's basically, there's going to be some spoilers here. Sorry. It is a horror movie, and it starts out like a normal thing. You know, a bunch of fucking dumbass teenagers go to a cabin in the woods and they're drinking and all that shit. And like, shit starts going crazy and, all this like zombies come and all this stuff. It turns out that the whole thing is staged. There is a facility that's underground making all this stuff happen. It's like, so there's basically all these monsters in cages that are like underground. Yeah, all over the world, this has to happen. And it's essentially human sacrifice in order to keep these gods or whatever from destroying the world. They have to do these human sacrifices. In this context, it's myths of like horror movies, right? Like the people have to die in a certain order. There's a virgin who has to die at the end or survive. Yeah, it's basically ancient myths that have to be reenacted, I guess, like every year or so, or else the gods will basically destroy the world. They figure this out at the end and they're like smoking a joint, like the two characters that survive. And they're like, fuck it. Let's just let the gods destroy the world because humanity is like a piece of shit. And it's pretty funny. Like it's very descriptive of a kind of control system. All this stuff has to play out a certain way or else the gods will come and fucking destroy everything.
Damn.
Yeah, you got to see it. It's wild. It's a crazy movie. It's probably my favorite horror movie, honestly. And like when he said that, I was like, holy fucking shit. Like that makes so much sense.
Well, that's an interesting part of like a lot of these ancient myths when it comes to blood. I know we've talked about like the creation of man being similar, like how a lot of myths portray mankind being created from clay and then like life is breathed into them. But like people in the original myth, the Sumerian myth with Marduk and Tiamat, Marduk defeats Tiamat, and Tiamat is like this ancient older god that is like a dragon. Marduk uses the blood of Tiamat mixed with the clay of the earth to create humans, which are created as slaves for the lazy gods. And it's interesting the role that blood plays. That's a part of Secret Machines. I was listening to Secret Machines 1, Gods, the nonfiction on audiobook. And that's a major part of the first few chapters is how DNA and blood appears to be like something that's for whatever reason desirable. Like it appears that blood, even in these ancient cultures, blood appears to be, dude, this is going to be so crazy. I don't want to talk.
No, it's cool. Like,
like
did you see, I saw something online that's like, people under 20 can make $850 donating blood to like, I don't know. It seems like no, I'm serious. It seems like a fucking like vampire thing, like Peter Thiel's in charge of, where he's like paying all these young kids to like drink their blood or something. I'm serious, man. It's crazy.
Well, that's the thing with like, dude, take the cattle mutilation phenomenon, for example. Like, there are reports of bloodless, trackless cattle mutilation where a farmer's cow is splayed out, not a drop of blood to be found, and not a track in sight of any vehicle that contributed to this event happening.
Yeah, it was Linda. You know that.
Yeah.
Linda Bolton Howe did all the cat. Remember?
That's what the debunkers said. Is that
so funny?
She came, little 4'11" Linda Howe came out in a hovercraft,
sucked all the blood out of a fucking cow.
to make
that's like the funniest thing ever. Like, like the image is just like, dude, oh god, like she's drained the blood out of a cow to like investigate it and like grift. Like it's the craziest. It's like, yeah, we're the conspiracy theorists. Nuts.
I don't know what to make of the role blood played in a lot of these ancient myths, or why it was so important to them. Like, I think that the Secret Machines Gods does a really good job of trying to like chisel that issue down. But to me, a lot of these myths are so garbled, and like they're the biggest takeaway I have from examining any myth is that they didn't have the words that we have today to describe things. And what I'm worried about is if these things have just been happening constantly and we're just like ignoring some main aspects of the story because that's not our particular belief system. But like the big picture wise, we're not examining what these myths are saying. Why are we the way that we are? Because we're so much different than every other everything. A big element in a lot of these stories is that human beings are like the result of some sort of conflict.
Speaking of cattle mutilations or just some blood, from Vallée's Forbidden Science 5. I don't know if you remember this quote, but
this is the most recent one, right?
Yeah. It says, over the next hour or so, he gave me a summary of his supposed experiences, fellow pilots who saw a strange craft, colleagues he'd taken to see John Mack, a Nevada colonel he introduced to Bigelow, and a very disturbed FBI agent who got drunk with him and confessed he'd been put in charge of surveillance for a site where 100 bodies had been found, dropped from the sky naked. Nothing is verifiable in these stories. What kind of science can you do with them?
This is people?
Yeah, no, this is a story Vallée put into his book. But he's saying like, this is crazy. Like, are they feeding me bullshit? But yeah, imagine that. 100 bodies dropped from the sky naked.
Oh my God.
I guess that's something they wouldn't want to release, the review board, right?
Obviously, like
what do you do with that? Like you're like, hey, check this out. Don't like tell your kids about this. This is kind of proves the point why controlled disclosure is needed. I don't know, man. We just need the fucking truth to like stamp out this bullshit that's turning people into fucking psychos, and it's a problem. Yeah, it's a good one. There's some shit in there, and yeah, I should have it out tomorrow night. So
watch, it's gonna be like 17 minutes long.
Yeah, we'll see.
I'm just kidding, dude.
No, it'll be good.
All right, man.
All right, man. Sounds good. I'll let you know. Yeah, it was a good chat. Always fun as well.